entire vehicle goes to the seafloor. What you're seeing here is an integrated launch and recovery system. You can barely see the umbilical here.
The team that's out on, or was out on the Titanic site and recovering the remains of the Titan submersible is a well-known member of the community, certainly very skilled.
As we start today, as we start this conversation that we're going to have, I want to ask us to keep grounded in the solemnity of this event.
Recovering items from nearly 4,000 meters of water is a challenging undertaking. Certainly many of the activities also would be similar regardless of the water depth, even if it was relatively shallow in comparison. The questions and challenges relate to the robot rigging the items to be retrieved to the surface. Providing suitable lifting points so that the items can be brought back to the surface. The majority of the items and debris probably are beyond the capacity of the vehicle to actually bring back to the surface on board the robot. It's likely that the operations would have involved lowering a cable from the surface vessel, using the robot to actually attach that cable to the appropriate rigging that had been applied to the item, and then standing back while the item is brought to the surface. And certainly from this type of water depth, it's a long trip, probably taking well over an hour to bring the item to the surface.
We focused our efforts to arrive on the site of Titanic, prepared to rescue Titan.
The first thing that they would focus on, of course, is mapping the debris on the seafloor. One would normally, undertake activities with precise navigation to identify all the pieces of debris prior to actually moving into a recovery operation of that debris.
So Odysseus 6K is a remotely operated vehicle, meaning it operates from a ship through a tether. This is the control room of the system.
Some of the electronics has information which may be recoverable, and our colleagues at the National Transportation Safety Board, working in conjunction with the Coast Guard, are expert at this sort of thing, and I expect that they will, if anyone can, be in a position to extract any useful information from items that have been recovered.
We arrived on site less than 24 hours later. 0430 local lead times. We arrived in Arctic, integrated into the ongoing and multinational rescue effort. At that point, within an hour, 0530, our system was launched from the back deck and began to descend to the seafloor. Shortly after arriving on the seafloor, we discovered the debris of the Titan submersible. Of course, we continued to document the site, and by 12 o'clock, sadly, a rescue turned into a recovery. I have to apologize, we're still demobilizing. A lot of emotions, people are tired. Control room, which is there, workshop, we're independent of a ship. We've always known and we've always wanted to be available for these types of situations. Wish the call never came, but we wanted to be ready when it did. And so it's designed to withstand depths up to 6,000 meters. All the equipment, everything on there has to operate at that depth. Importantly, it has 7 function manipulators, high definition 4K cameras, heavy lift capability, a multiplicity of tools to allow us to do work at depth. In some ways, I think, as we look back at this, which we will, it was unprecedented in a sense, our ability to arrive at seafloor and then go to work. And then we worked for another 5 or 6 days at 3,800 meters. And then we began the recovery operations, which in and of themselves are quite challenging. And I can't say enough about the professionalism and the preparation of the entire response that allowed us to come in as primary and have that waiting for us. I mean, it's a little hard to explain, and the visual, of course, is in all of our head, but that was the real opportunity.
Sat in this control room and looked at the monitors. The time ticked away. Obviously, there's a lot of talk, of course, about the oxygen running out. Can you kind of describe the mood in the room for you and the crew, and really the pressure that you were feeling as time kind of ticked away?
I can answer that actually pretty simply. We were focused at the job at hand. That's what we do. That's what all of these people do. We were laser focused on rescue. Of course, we had to describe several scenarios, but we were not set for anything else but recovering that submersible. And that's what everybody was focused on. So it was laser focus. Job at hand, safety, get it done. Here, this allows the vehicle to be taken off deck, rotated.
The carbon fiber tube part of the hull might have failed. That's a material that's never been used before in the hulls of these deep diving submersibles. And if that failed, then that would collapse. But then what happens to the titanium end caps would be very different to if it was one of those end caps or the porthole on one of those end caps that failed. And indeed, if the carbon fiber tube failed, you might expect actually the porthole to be blown out as a result of the implosion. And that means the bolts around it, holding just keep it in place, they would break in a very particular way that would show that that happened. So it's this kind of forensic investigation may allow them to piece together the kind of events that took place. The other vehicles that go this deep with a spherical hull typically only have 2 or 3 people inside, because to keep a spherical hull but fit more people in, it has to get bigger and bigger. And then it actually, made out of metal, it becomes really too big and heavy to lift it off a ship and back onto the ship easily at the end of a dive. So this was a different design, splitting that sphere, putting a tube in the middle to create space for 5 people. Although some military submarines, which are designed for much shallower depths, have, unfortunately, when they've had systems failure or damage, they've sunk beyond their limits and they have imploded. There's never been an implosion of a deep sea submersible during a dive before. These submersibles have an incredible safety record over the past 97 years. And the last fatalities involving occupants of a deep sea submersible were 50 years ago. So it's crucial that this investigation establishes why this disaster is such an outlier in the history of deep sea submersible diving.